It's tough to be a parent, and meting out discipline is probably the toughest part of being a parent. Disciplining children is always difficult. We don't want to use corporal punishment, and we don't want to encourage bad behavior by awarding attention to it. Discipline becomes even more difficult during a divorce, and it can be even trickier when perhaps the other parent is encouraging, or at least not discouraging, bad behavior. Even worse, in some instances, the other parent is actively undermining you and teaching or telling a child that it's okay to disrespect you or to act defiantly. So, what can a parent do to discipline a child appropriately under such circumstances? Hi, my name is Chaim Steinberger, and I'm a matrimonial and family law lawyer in New York City. To deal with these issues, I've invited my friend Cindy Browning to give us some ideas. Cindy has been a practicing marriage and family therapist in northern New Jersey for more than 25 years, specializing in treating trauma and couples and families with relationship difficulties. She also trains and teaches other therapists on how to treat trauma and couples and families as well. As a result, she's perfectly situated to advise us on dealing with these challenging issues. Welcome, Cindy.
Good morning.
And so, how should a parent who's parenting a child, and particularly because this is of interest to my listeners, a parent going through a divorce, I mean, disciplining is always difficult. If a parent is going through a divorce, how should a parent discipline the child?
I think a defiant child strikes fear in the heart of any parent because you have a lot of responsibility, and the fear at that point is that you won't have any control. And we lose sight of the focus that this is a relationship, first of all. And in that relationship, the parent wants to convey really three things, being affirming to the child, nurturing, providing for the needs of the child, identifying them, and of course, limit setting. The child needs to grow up learning that there's limits on all of us. We can't just be uncontained and do whatever we want. There's rules in the world. And that goes for how we treat each other and how we treat our parents. So the relationship is key. And when we lose sight of that, things can go a little sideways. I'm thinking specifically about, it's different at different developmental stages. Obviously, with a very young child, you have to listen to mommy might be enough. But sometimes the child does need educating about that, about the fact that, we are not going to do that. We are going to do this. And parents need to feel comfortable in the fact that a family is not a democracy. It is absolutely a dictatorship. Hopefully a benevolent dictatorship that's taking the needs and best interests of the child into account. But it has to be coming from the top. The leadership has to come from the top. We don't want the leadership coming from the child. That helps kids feel safe and secure. They know that you're going to take care of me. They know I can push and defy because you're going to set a limit on me. You're going to guide me and show me what's enough. So that relationship is really key. The kid has to care about that relationship enough and care about the parent. And the parent should assume that no matter what the child says or does, that they want to care about the parent. That's healthy. They want to be healthy. And so a good thing to remember in a pinch, especially if you're in that, oh my God, I'm losing control panic, is to think of rest, R-E-S-T. R stands for reflect, which means state back what you heard. Let's go with, the quintessential, I hate you and you're the worst mother and I don't want you to be my mother and I wish my friend's mother was my mother. Why can't I go live at their house, right? So you would reflect that back. You would essentially repeat that back. Okay, so what I hear you saying is they really think I'm the worst mother and just wish you didn't have to deal with me at all, right? You wish you could have a different mom. So we reflect. It's not the message we want to hear. And so it kind of runs against the grain, but I am suggesting that you start with reflecting. Oh, I said rest, but I meant race. That's a different one. Rest is a different one. Race. So R is reflect still. A is accept. We have to have this, and in no particular order, we have to accept what the child is giving us. In that moment, we don't want to correct. We don't want to be shocked and horrified. We want to accept whatever it is that the child is giving us, because ultimately we need to get underneath whatever that message is and really understand the true meaning of the behavior or the message the child is sending. So along those lines, C, we need to get curious, right? We need to get curious about what that is. All right, so can you tell me what makes me such a bad mom? You know, can you tell me what you're feeling about that? You sound really angry when you say that. Are you angry? And can you tell me, you know, what's going on? What happened? Why are you so angry? You know, so we want to get curious, you know, ask not why, but, you know, evocative questions that will engage the child in revealing more. And if you have that attitude of being accepting and you're listening and reflecting back, that's already very encouraging. You know, people will say, well, my kid won't tell me anything. And I think, okay, we'll start with race, reflect, accept, be curious. And then last but not least is empathy. You know, all emotions need ideally an empathic, attuned response. An empathically attuned response, which means I understand you. That makes sense to me. I can understand how you'd be feeling that way. I can understand why you'd be saying that. And then we feel understood, we feel connected, we have that experience that we want between parents and kids, which causes that bonding. It's called intimacy. It's an intimate connection where the parent knows and understands what's going on with the child, and maybe can even help the child to understand their internal experience a little bit better. Yeah, so you really, you know, you're hitting and acting out and throwing your fists around because you don't know how to connect. You don't know how to express that. Okay, I get that. That's really frustrating. So that makes sense. Then after we have that bond and that connection, we can talk about, all right, we got to figure out something else, because here comes the limit setting, right? That's not okay. You can't hit your sister when you're angry at mommy. You can't hit mommy when you're angry at mommy. We can't do that. We got to figure something else out. I totally get how angry you are, and it makes sense why you would be. So let's talk about what else we're going to do. And that's problem solving, of course. But ultimately, limit setting is being willing to figure out how to help that child have the incentive to do what you are asking them to do, to follow the rules, whatever they are. Don't hit your sister. Do your homework. And parents forget this, but learning is repetitive. If it takes more than one time per day, that's not a problem. That's called parenting, right? I have had parents complain, oh my God, I tell him every day. I've told them every day for weeks and weeks and months, and I still have to tell him every time. And I say, yeah, I guess when you get to go, whew, it's finally sunk in. And they say, when's it going to be? And I said, well, somewhere between 18 and 25. Yeah, then you're done. And you go, then you'll call me up and say, wow, I don't have to tell him to put away his clothes. He seems to do it at his own house. And I'll say, bravo. Well done, right? It only took 5 times a day for 25 years. Very good.
So there's so much you shared with us, Cindy, that I want to follow up. I guess you say race, reflect, accept, be curious, and be empathetic. But where in that do I say, but wait a second, I threw you this great big birthday party and I took off and I didn't see my friends in order to stay with you because you were sick? When do you get to tell the child that?
Never, never. It's a thankless job. It's not going to be, you know, probably after your parents are dead, you reflect and go, darn, I had it pretty good. They were good parents. And before that, no, right? So you never get to say that, because as a parent, you don't give to get. The only good reason to become a parent, there's really 2. It's because you want to, and because you have whatever resources are going to be necessary to give that child the help they need to grow up. They need help to grow up. They're not there to meet our needs. They're not there to be thankful. They're not there to make us feel like we've done a good job. Certainly not. Ask any parent. So
I'm,
never is the answer to that.
I'm also particularly taken, you started off talking about relationships and you've given us so much, but you make it sound like disciplining is not about punishment or being angry or making the child feel hurt. You were using a different language. You were talking about relationships.
Absolutely. I'm suggesting that we get that kid to care. And look, if you're coming into this late, you got a, middle schooler or something like that, and there's a lot of water under the bridge, there's patterns that have been set. Happens all the time. Um, don't worry about it. Catch up now and say, huh,
You mean it's never too late to start what you're telling us?
absolutely never. And you can always say, listen, I used to yell and scream at you when you did that. And I've been thinking about that lately and I learned something. And what I learned is that when I yelled and screamed, it didn't help. And B, it gave you the wrong message. I shouldn't have been yelling and screaming. But I do want you to hear me. And I need to manage my frustration about that better and let you know that when I tell you not to hit your sister, I seriously mean it. That is not good enough. I don't want that in our house. It's not part of what I want to have happen in our family. So that's not going to be okay anymore. But I'm not going to yell and scream about it because um, I need to change that. And going forward, we're going to talk about it.
So to take what you've given us and to ratchet it up, what do you do now? I'm very involved with parents who are being alienated with the other parent. Perhaps a parent is teaching a child not to listen to the other parent or to actively make trouble at the other parent. And so you don't normally, usually when you tell the child stop it, they might stop it, but here the child, it's a badge of honor for the child. How do you how do you invoke this relationship when the relationship is so tenuous and damaged and or may even feel like it's completely gone? How do I mean, I guess I'm used to disciplining by either threats or fear or punishment, or if you don't do this, I won't do that. How do you do it using your relationship technique?
Well, I suppose fear and threats do actually work sometimes, but it damages the relationship ultimately. And so when you were talking about that, I was thinking, go back to assuming that the child benefits from and wants a positive connection to the parent and speak to that. And you can look, if you know that the other parent is trash talking you or your relationship or giving bad advice to the child or saying you don't have to listen to her when you're at her house, then all you can do is what you got in your house. And you can say to that child, look, I don't agree with that. And I wish that mommy or daddy or whoever it is hadn't said that to you, because I think it's really confusing and painful. But I can't change what they're doing over there. I'm just telling you here, you do have to listen to me. That's not going to be good enough. And I'm really sorry. I mean, I can talk to mom or dad, whichever side this is. I can talk to dad about that, or I can talk to whoever our mediator is about that. I don't know if I can change it, but I'm really sorry that that happened because he gave you the wrong message. It's not okay.
And so if you tell your child, I don't want you hitting your sister, and they go ahead and do it again.
That's when you have to figure out what it is that's going to incentivize this child. I do recall being so frustrated at trying to get my kids to do, I don't remember what, but something. And, you're just like up to here. And I said, I don't know what. Look, don't make me do it, but I'll sit down and I will think about what I can do to cause you to be very happy to comply with my wishes. I'll think of something, I will. And that is kind of what we have to do. We have to say, um, no computer, no phone, whatever it is, without fear. The kid said, fine, I'm going to live with my dad. I'm going to go live with my dad. You say, listen, you just kind of reiterate your message and don't react to that. Yeah, okay, it doesn't feel good for me to set this limit. I get it. But I'm your mom and this is what's good for you. And I think on some level, you know it. And I want you to listen to what I'm saying. And I want you to take the feedback. I want you to do what I'm asking you. You keep telling them. Now, there was another thought I had about that, about limit setting, that at some point you're powerless, right? You got a big, giant 16-year-old waving his arms around, you know, I don't know. I think my kid was 13 when he was bigger than me, right? So if he had been like that, I'm limited as to what I can do. And as a parent, you do have to accept that. And you can explain that and say, listen, you're big enough now that you have to control yourself because I can't do it. You still are a part of this family and I'm still in charge and I still want you to do what I'm asking you to do. And if you, that's the way families work. You know, mom or dad, we're in charge. And the kids, you know, you're along for the ride and you have to do what's being asked. That's how families work. So I'm going to do my side. I'm not going to yell and scream. I'm going to be respectful of you. And I want you to do what I'm asking you to do. You got to bring your temperature down. You got to get a grip on your anger. You got to sit down and talk to me and not wave your arms like that. You're too big for that. You can't do it. If you don't want to comply, here's the facts. That doesn't work in our family. And, you know, I don't know what happens. You go outside and you wave your arms and screams and somebody involves the authorities, then it's out of my control. And that means you're out from under my protection. And I don't want that. Sometimes you have to explain it and accept it yourself.
That's a scary message, both for parent and for the child. And I know from my field, the same thing. If something happens to me and I've got plenty of time to consider it and think how I'll react, I might react more calmly, more coolly. But if it's done under pressure, then all of a sudden it makes me crazy and I feel the overarching need to respond quickly, and that ratchets up the tension, and therefore I can't consider. I would imagine that the challenge here is for the parent who's caught in that moment to be able to come up and be able to do that. So I guess I think what you're saying is, okay, we can take a moment later to reflect. In the moment, use race and reflect and sort of bring it back and empathize, and then take your time to think of how you're going to, if you have to do it again.
You have to know what your consequences are. People get upset. What am I going to say? Well, you know, I'll say, I'm going to threaten them. Like, if you don't do your homework, then you can't watch TV. I'm like, you don't have to tell them what the punishment is up front, you know. You can say, I'm going to make sure you're going to want to, and figure it out later. Don't put the pressure on yourself. And don't make the punishment too big, because you're going to get punished then, right? Yeah, how hard it is to keep a kid in the house for a week? You don't want that punishment. So think of something that you can live with. And I guess I'm also thinking, try to hold on to that message and believe it down to your bones that my kid will benefit from a positive connection with me, and they want it no matter what they say.
And that itself is very challenging. As a teacher, I learned, just on the last point you made, as a teacher, I learned that giving out two extra math problems for homework was a lot more effective than giving them 2 whole pages for each time they misbehaved, because that added up to such an amount that it was beyond their comprehension, and it became meaningless. But when I gave them another 2 problems, which was only another minute or two, they were completely outraged, and they'd scream at the kid who was making trouble to stop it. We're all getting punished because of you. So I think there's a lot of wisdom in meting out punishments very with a teaspoon, with an eyedropper, and do that. Well, thank you very much, Cindy, for joining us and for sharing all of this wisdom. I think it will be very useful to lots of parents, and I thank you for coming on and sharing it.
My pleasure.